Hello and welcome to another edition of Office Hours with State Representative John Hampton. Thrilled today to have a faithful steward of the Farmington River, the new Executive Director of the Farmington River Watershed Association, Bill Dornbos.
Thank you, Representative Hampton.
Welcome. Did I say your name correctly?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Simsbury. You've been on the job of this incredible organization now in its 60th year? Or plus?
We were founded in 1953, so what's the math on that? Over 60 years.
Over 60 years.
Right.
But you've been on since March.
Yes.
And we're so glad to have you.
Thank you.
And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to have you here on the show and talk a little bit about your background, how you came to FRWA, some of your opportunities and challenges ahead, what your vision is for the watershed. So tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from. And
Sure. So I'm from the Midwest originally, from Michigan, and that really is partly why I love this job and why I wanted to have this job, because from an early age, I was an outdoorsy kid, and my parents were, really into the outdoors. My father was a hunter and loved to fish, and so growing up, I did all of those kinds of things, canoed all around Michigan. And
where in Michigan?
I grew up in just outside of Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Okay.
And my dad grew up in the northern Lower Peninsula. Everybody uses their hand to refer. So right around here outside of Ludington.
Nice.
And so I used to go up and canoe on the Pere Marquette River and the Pine River, and they're beautiful rivers. I think they're both, or at least one of them is a Wild and Scenic river, also like the Farmington River. And I was also a Boy Scout for a long time. So
did you make it to Eagle?
I made it to Eagle.
Did you
surprisingly,
really?
Yes.
You're an Eagle Scout?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
that's a distinction.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, that was a big part of my life, and I just loved being outside. And I took that with me to school and to law school, and I wanted.
Where'd you go?
University of Michigan.
Okay.
And my dad's an attorney, so I guess I was also following his, in his footsteps there too. And I wanted to do work for the environment, but I had a path that took me, life took me around some curves for a while till I got to the place where I was actually doing, environmental law and policy work. I had been mainly doing litigation for a while and paying off school debt and things like that. And so I was still in the Midwest, and then eventually found my way to Connecticut in 2009. Started working for the Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy.
Did the job bring you?
The job did bring me to it, yes.
Right.
And I loved that, and it gave me a chance to learn some things about how to run an organization. And then I found a job with Acadia Center, which is a group that's here in New England and focused on clean energy and climate work, and had a great time there, seven years almost, I think. And then FRWA had the job search, and I thought this would be a great way to, become an executive director, but also have a chance to work on the river and water issues, which is really close to my heart, but hadn't been an area I'd been working on recently. And I've been very lucky to be here, and then a whole bunch of different things happened.
Yeah.
Big things, good and bad, surprising.
So the first time I met you was an exciting day.
That's right.
Down at the Flower Bridge. We were celebrating with Senator Murphy and others the Wild and Scenic designation. Do you want to talk about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is, a culmination of a lot of work by a lot of different people. FRWA had a hand in it, but you were involved. The delegation was involved. The towns were involved, and the study started
2011 or so.
I think even earlier than that might be, but it wrapped up in 2011, and it's been 8 years since then, and
amazing.
Yeah, really amazing. I think some folks had almost given up hope, that it would actually come to pass, because all it needed was for someone in Congress to make it, get it through the House, get it through the Senate, have the president sign it. So that was a wonderful development. It was the second day I was on the job.
Nice, and you took credit for it, right?
Right, exactly.
Wow,
right.
You are good.
Right.
Where do we go from there with Wild and Scenic now? What do we do?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And really, it's all about implementation now. So the lower river is designated now, just like the upper river is. And the stretch includes Farmington, Avon, Simsbury, Granby, East Granby, Bloomfield, and Windsor. So all of the what I think of as the lower river towns in the valley, and then also the Salmon Brook. People don't think about that, but it's that spur, the tributary in the northern part there. So we need to pull together representatives from all these towns to form the advisory council that then works on the management plan. There is one already. There is already a management plan, but now the towns and these appointees need to, work through all the different issues around that management plan, and eventually they'll get some funding from Congress to help with project work, like the Upper River designation has. I don't know when that'll happen. Maybe in the spring. It depends on the federal budget process. So,
sure. Yeah.
The request is in, and it's about $100,000 a year that the committee gets to allocate out to different projects, and they can be things like stream bank restoration, they can be outreach projects. And the Upper River, which already has a segment, Wild and Scenic segment for a long time, since 1994, and a council already in place, those towns have been doing things like funding scholarships for students, and they've been created a river steward program that operates in the summer to help people safely use the river. So we probably look to that segment to do a lot of the same sorts of things, but it's up to the committee really what they would want to do as a committee, what they want to focus on. And I'm excited for it because it'll be a chance for the towns to really re-engage and be more involved again with the Wild and Scenic issue. They were very involved in the study process and making that all happen, and then it just went away for 8 years. And now they get a chance to, this is the fun part now, you get to actually be involved in stewarding and, protecting the river with the help of the National Park Service. There are lots of, something we should probably touch on. There are lots of different kinds of misconceptions around what the designation means.
Sure.
It doesn't affect property rights. It doesn't impose any new regulations on property owners or landowners or towns. It really protects the free-flowing nature of the river. Sure. So if you want to think about it, the shorthand version of Wild and Scenic is it just prevents the construction of dams or diversions. So that's the history of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, is a response to all the dam building out west. Sure. In the 50s and 60s.
It's all positive.
It's all very positive. So that'll be exciting. It'll be great because then the town appointees drive that process. There are other stakeholders on that committee, FRWA, the Pequabic River Watershed Association, Stanley Decker because of the Black and Decker because of Stanley Power, because of the unique situation with the dam at Rainbow Reservoir, which produces hydropower. But by and large, the vast majority of the appointees to that council are town appointees, 2 or 3 depending on
from each town.
From each town, that's right.
So that was your first day. Your second day, you walk into the office, and are you the type just to come in and sweeping changes, or did you kind of come in and say, okay, I'm going to listen, look, study, give the first few months kind of get the dynamic, and did you come in with any preconceived notions that this is what I want to do right away? And or you tend to be you seem more thoughtful, more deliberate, and more strategic.
Right. That's just an illusion, right?
Yeah.
But no, I am kind of more of a listener, and I want to sit back and kind of get a lay of the land and get to know the organization and the board and the supporters, and it's got such a long history. And I like to joke that everyone else really knows the organization better than I do. Still, 6 months in, it's still a big learning curve. And I think so much about it was running really well, and so the organization itself, it doesn't need a big overhaul or anything like that. I think what we need to do, and then part of why the board brought me on, was just to think about some new areas of stronger focus. So like climate change, for instance, this huge threat to, all of us and to the river and to natural resources, but it's been something that FRWA has, focused on to some extent. But I think now we need to maybe bring that up in the conversation a bit more about the river and the valley. That's tied to resilience. And so I think resiliency is going to be a big focus for us going forward. But a lot of those conversations about major changes in directions, we haven't finished that process yet. But I do think we really want to, play to our strengths. So we have always had really good working relationships with the towns. We want to continue to build on that. We want to help the towns in the Farmington River Valley with their challenges and with their growth. We want to be able to support the towns as they look to thrive and be more sustainable, and prepare for climate change and all the resilience issues that are around that.
Yeah.
So it's not so much a change in how we're structured or what we do, but it's more of a focus on a certain topic that's really rising in urgency these days.
Yeah, incredible urgency. So you've got the stewardship aspect of the Watershed Association. You've got educational programs, which you continue to do.
Yep.
Which is great. Recreational programs. I'm thinking as a townie, somebody, I've been here my whole life, and Simsbury is now celebrating 350 years this year. I don't know if you knew that. Hopefully the watershed will be part of
absolutely
the events. But I think it's so important, especially as new people come to town and all of our towns, to really connect with the river. Like all of us, we get used to like our surroundings and go, okay, I'm going to canoe someday on the river, and you drive by it every day. And but I think it's really important, especially with young people, that we try and get them to farms. As important to get them down to the river and more connectivity. And I myself, I think I got down to the river maybe 6 times this summer, which is pretty good. But I want to do more.
Sure.
And sometimes I've jumped in the river. People tell me to jump in the river all the time. No, I just on a hot day, I know the spots growing up there to jump in, and so I'm sure that's a part of your mission, is to really broaden the audience, so to speak. And I think there's a lot of misconception. What's a watershed? It sounds complicated, and maybe trying to.
Right. It's very simple, really, right? A watershed is just where, when the water falls on the ground, this is where it flows to, and so this is all of the watershed that feeds the Farmington River. It's just all the land that captures the water that ends up in the river. Critical. And it's super critical.
Especially with development, when I hear about a new development or project, people ask me, well, what do you think? I said, well, my first call is to the Watershed Association. It's to think,
and we appreciate that.
It's to, like, as a selectman or as a legislator, how is it going to affect? In fact, it came up in the conversation about the trail that the bike trail.
That's right.
That we're going to connect from Simsbury through Terriffill Park, as you know. One option is that hugs the river.
Right.
And on through Terriffill to Bloomfield. So, when I first heard that, very exciting. But my first thought was, okay, is that going to, impact the river? And your answer might be, I thought was that you guys kind of cleared that. I
haven't seen the so I haven't actually been that involved in that, and I don't, and I look forward to learning more about it. I'm aware that it's out there, and I'd love to see the what the proposal might look like for where it goes. A lot of it depends, like any of these projects, it depends on the devil's in the details. Where it's actually going to go, and bike paths are interesting for us because as an environmental organization that wants the valley to be sustainable, long term, we all need to be doing more to get out of cars, and bike paths are wonderful in that way, right? And they're also great for attracting people to the town, and for giving people a chance to get outside and actually getting in touch with the river too. So it's just a matter of how they're sited and how they're built, and
you don't want to do any harm.
That's right.
In the process,
right. And sometimes it's tricky because you have floodplain landscape, floodplain habitat, and so do you want to, and some of that habitat's now become much more rare. So floodplain forest is viewed now in New England as especially rare, and in our valley we have quite a bit of it still, which is a special thing. It means we probably have a more resilient river and watershed because of it. So how do you manage that? So if you're going to be siting a bike path through something like that, you want to take a lot of care with how you do that. And so I look forward to being involved in that discussion. And I think sometimes there is a misconception, FRWA is opposed to any development near the river or anything like that. And that's
not
I
true.
hope that's not right. I hope that's not.
You're always of counsel, and
Right.
like I said, like me, many turn to you to make sure we're not doing harm and trying
Right.
to do
Right.
to the best. In terms of the watershed, it might be hard at this juncture to give a grade, but what is the what grade would you give the status of our watershed right now?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
The health, and are we good overall? Are we struggling? Are we? How do we compare to?
I like that question, and it's funny. We actually had just. It's a funny coincidence because one of my colleagues came back from a conference in New Jersey for the Wild and Scenic Rivers in the region, and Watershed had just recently started doing a scorecard for their watershed, which we thought was really well done and presented.
Neat.
And, so there's different ways to rate the quality, and one way is to look at the water quality and what kind of pollution levels there are, and if it's drinkable, swimmable. And on those scores, the river actually is doing pretty well. Certainly the upper river and, the Barkhamsted Reservoir, that's really high quality, clean, unusually clean water that we can depend on for our drinking water. And actually it's the drinking water for Hartford and West Hartford and, all the way down. And so on that level, I think we're doing really well. I think I would probably give the water quality an A-. In that way. The caveat would be that, with new emerging pollution threats, you kind of don't always know what's coming. And PFAS is the one that...
Yeah, let's talk about that. So we had the high of Wild and Scenic, and then the low of having... Right when you come into town,
right.
It was the middle of summer, wasn't it?
June 8th is when the spill happened.
The spill. Talk about that a little bit, because we're all very concerned about PFAS beyond the river. And so it was not an issue I had any familiarity with coming into the job, and I think, and in really the whole organization, we were a little bit taken aback by it. The firefighting foam came from the airport, went through the sanitary sewer, through the MDC treatment plant in Windsor, and then into the river. And that's, no fault of MDC's actually, because that plant is not designed to remove PFAS. It's a problem everywhere where this happens in the United States. There's often these kinds of discharges from industrial, sources into a sewer system. So thousands of gallons of the firefighting foam went into the river. So you've probably seen some of the pictures. They're pretty dramatic. It looks like a sudsy, foamy bathtub at that point. It's awful.
So and it was very shocking, really disturbing. And that stretch of the river is still, so it's just from the treatment plant down to the confluence with the Connecticut River. And so that's like I want to say an 8 mile or so stretch. It's in the final stretch of the river. That's still, there's still a ban on eating any fish caught in that stretch of the river. And I know talking to some business owners, who depend on the river and the recreation area, they've taken a hit this summer. They've seen business down, and we've had a number of phone calls, and we still less so now. But over the course of the summer, we were getting phone calls from the public saying, "Hey, I want to go kayaking in Collinsville. Do I need to worry about the PFAS spill?" People don't always understand how the river works or the flow or the direction, but there was so much attention to this spill and a lot of fear around it. Especially, I think families were really concerned about potentially exposing their kids to it. The good news is most of the river is safe as far as we know. There certainly hasn't been a big dramatic PFAS spill like this, in other parts of the river in the recent history that we're aware of. But that stretch of the river is still, I would say no one should fish there. We have,
that's up in Windsor area, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So the rest of the river, it's a different story, but we're still waiting on the fish testing results from deep on that first sample. They'll be releasing at some point a cleanup plan for the spill and that part of the river, and we'll be very curious to see the results on sediment testing too, and then how that may or may not require dredging and other alteration of the riverbanks. So,
and you're on the task force, which is great. The PFAS task force at the state level, which is going to make recommendations that'll come to us in the legislature, I believe, which will be terrific. So we can help address that issue. Like we said earlier, not just for the river, but there's PFAS and other things that we really need to...
consumer products, just across the board, carpeting. waterproof
Teflon,
jackets.
yeah,
Right.
Teflon. So it's been really quiet for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the big Bill's big idea coming in that you kind of were that you stream about and think about that? I know you're kind of staying the course, but is there something that really big that you want to address in your first year that's kind of that you want to unveil on this show?
Yeah. That's also a really good question, and
like a signature Bill Dornbos
effort of some kind.
Yeah.
I think climate change actually is an area where
it's huge.
It's so huge, and I think it's a change for conservation. I mean, all conservation organizations and FRWA, I think we think of ourselves in that way. The mission is protect, conserve, and restore the Farmington River and its watershed lands. So we're a conservation organization, although we focus on water. I think all conservation organizations are thinking about, okay, how do we deal with climate change, and how do we try to solve this in our way? Because we don't go to advocate for cleaner cars at the legislature or anything like that. But I do kind of wonder if we shouldn't find a way to be more involved on that issue, because the river and our water supply and our watershed lands are all threatened by these changes that are happening. And we've just been noticing anecdotally this year some of the changes, more rain earlier in the year, heavier rainfall events. Now then it dries out more in July and August. This has all been predicted. And so how's that going to change our river and all the communities that depend on the river here in Farmington, the Farmington Valley, how is that all going to be impacted? Those are big questions. So I think what we're thinking about is how we can provide some insight on that, whether that's through some kind of very focused report. We've been sampling water quality and temperature since the early aughts in the Farmington River. And so I think there's some insight that comes out of that. You can see trends, and then we have to decide how we're going to deal with that. And so we hope to make some recommendations on that as well at some point. But that's one area.
That's critical. And I think, as you're talking, I'm thinking that, you can't be doing that in isolation. I think we need to kind of step back and look at it as this big table, like a bike wheel.
Right.
And you're just one spoke, but all the environmental groups, all of us together really need to, as leaders, need to address this big picture.
Right.
Because, the river's connected to the land is connected to the air, and it's,
That's absolutely right. And I think the towns too could play a really interesting, leading role here as well. And there's another watershed in the Massachusetts that I happen to pay attention to, the Charles River Watershed Association. I used to work with the person who's the executive director there, and they've been doing some interesting, we're convening the towns to begin thinking about climate adaptation and how they should, what they can do as towns. And I think, my job is probably going to be to push for more resources for all this. So not just for FRWA, but for the towns and the Farmington River Valley. We're going to need to start doing a lot more. And where's that funding going to come from? It's not going to come from the towns, or it shouldn't mainly come from the towns. This is a bigger problem than than any one town can handle on its own. So I think we're just going to need to be looking for ways to bring more attention and bring more insight, and then bring more resources to climate preparation and resiliency work. I've been talking a lot about climate, and that's an area where I have a particular personal focus. But stormwater pollution still remains the biggest challenge in the river, and so how we deal with stormwater and everything is crucial, and we'll keep working on that too. I don't have any great big ideas in that space, but I think
priorities.
Right. I think I would love to pull together the towns there too, and have some kind of ongoing information sharing and coordination about best practices for stormwater management. Because there's a lot of really good things actually going on amongst the towns on stormwater management. And I think if we can help facilitate that too, I think it would be a service to the different towns. It's hard. It's like every state is its own world politically, but
welcome to New England.
Right.
Welcome
but
to Connecticut.
It's true for the towns too, right?
Yeah.
So
but this is where we really can get together and take down the silos. And
right.
Are you familiar with the Farmington Valley Collaborative?
Yes, I learned about it like a couple weeks ago.
Great group of mayors in the valley who get together and talk about issues
These
like
kinds
this.
of issues, right?
Yeah, the common issues we all have.
Right.
Now tell me, folks can still become a member. We're going to flash up your, in our closing minutes here, we're going to flash up your website, which is frwa.org.
Yes.
All right, still remember that.
Yes. And
people can still join as a member, right?
Absolutely.
They can make a tremendous gift, right?
Yes, that's always welcome.
I know you do fundraising, and if you want to work with the folks over there on a planned gift or a state plan, or you can volunteer.
Yep.
A lot of stuff on your website for volunteers. A lot of great events. Any coming up that we should know about that you want to advertise?
We do have the river cleanup that's tomorrow, so that's very soon.
Okay.
That's very soon. But we also have our film festival coming up on November 2nd, and we'll have a little bit of an event before that. But then we're intending to make it a fun, interesting time. And so, the website has more details on all of those kinds of things.
Nice.
We have a number of different kind of fun events for kids right now that have to do with learning about aquatic bugs. And then we also have a dam tour that's coming up. I think that's in early October or later October, where we go and actually have a chance to look at the inside of one of the dams, the dam in Barkhamsted. Yeah, that's great. Always popular.
Kids and adults.
Right. I think we can only allow adults on that one. I'm not sure but we'll check with us if you're.
No, I'd be more interested in adults. Check it out.
Right.
From there's the Spoonville Dam, of course, which you folks got rid of. That was really, I saw that up close and personal. And of course, being from Terriffill, I'm connected to the river and the gorge, which is.
It's an amazing, beautiful place.
Great resource.
Right.
And the Farmington River is indeed one of our greatest treasures here in Simsbury and in the valley and in the state. And we're so glad that you're at the helm now.
Thank you.
We know you're going to be a good steward, and we support you, and wanted the opportunity to have the folks at home get to know you, and I know they can reach out to you, and you'll be accessible for questions and information, and really how to be part of the big picture in terms of how we look at these big issues, climate change, and now with the statewide water plan, which I was involved with, how to be, there's model ordinances for towns, and how do we. One of my big pet peeves is driving past Curtis Park on a rainy day and the sprinklers are going.
You're right.
We don't want to be over prohibitive to people, but we want to be smart about how we use our water and be conscious of drought. Because just drought does happen here.
Right.
But you're a tremendous resource, the FRWA. I can't say enough about you and your staff that you've inherited. And are you growing any staff, any new people, or
no plans right now? Yeah, but they have a great team in place, and I feel very lucky that way. For a small, some nonprofits, we have a staff of 5, and that's a wonderful
full-time.
3 full-time, 2 part-time.
Wow.
And that's a great team. That's able to do a lot of. We have a lot of territory to cover. Literally, it's over 600 square miles, the watershed, and we do things now in Massachusetts as well, since that's where the headwaters are. We just started doing water quality testing there this summer. So all of that work in Massachusetts is a whole nother layer on top of the work we've traditionally been doing in Connecticut. But it's a great opportunity too, and it's the whole watershed. So. We'd love to have more volunteers. We always need volunteers to help us with the water quality testing, especially. So if you're interested, that's a great thing to reach out to us about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, good luck, and keep in touch. We'll have you back again on the show. Bill Dornbos with the Farmington River Watershed Association, and thank you for being with us. Thank you at home for joining us for another episode of Office Hours. We'll see you next time.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.